Okay. So today in studio over Zoom, I would like to introduce Dr. Amy Novotny. Did I say that
Yes,
correctly?
very close. Novotny, yes.
Novotny. Okay.
Hmm.
Dr. Amy Novotny founded the PABR Institute, or say you would say, do you just
Paver.
PABR, huh? PABR
Hmm. Yep.
Institute,
Hmm.
paberinstitute.com, with the mission to provide pain, stress, and anxiety relief to those who seek a naturalistic form of treatment when other treatment methods have fallen short. Her unique approach comes from her experience treating in a variety of settings and with a wide range of patient populations over the past 11 years. Her background in orthopedics, sports, geriatrics, balance disorders, nerve injuries, and most recently chronic pain, uh, and influences from coursework at the postural, like
Hmm.
posture, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Postural Restoration Institute gave her the foundation to develop this treatment method to address a wide variety of painful and restrictive conditions. Her methods have helped countless people reduce and eliminate pain, stress, anxiety, orthopedic surgeries, sleep issues, and the need for medications, which is that's like the biggest thing for me when I read this. I think like just being
Hmm.
able to get out of medications. So she also co-authored two Amazon #1 best-selling books: Don't Quit: Stories of Persistence, Courage, and Faith, and Success Habits of Superachievers, which share her journey on how and why she developed the PABR method. Her ability to speak French and Spanish has allowed her to communicate with and help various clients from around the world, including France, Mexico, Central America, and South America. She has a variety of interests, including running 40 plus marathons, running 10 ultra marathons, including 200 milers. Seriously, like that's completing an Ironman triathlon, photographing wildlife and landscapes all over the world. And yeah, so it says that you were actually featured in a National Geographic shot world top photo of the day. That's like what a cool thing that out of your hobby you end up in National Geographic, right? Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, she's helped high profile entrepreneurs, business owners, physicians, and those in chronic pain or mental trauma alleviate pain, stress, anxiety, and sleep deprivation, orthopedic surgery, and the need for medications. Her methods have helped people like Robert Kiyosaki,
Hmm.
never,
Hmm.
to call her his body healer. She
Hmm.
will share with us on how all types of stress in our lives have physical repercussions that affect our body's pain, sleep, movement, tension, energy, and medication use. She will also dive into how our breathing pattern influences our nervous system and how we can change our breathing technique and body position to help us gain control over our body again and how we feel. That's like just all that stuff, like I said before we got online. Like I could just go for hours on that stuff. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to, yeah, be on this show. Yeah, so that was a big intro, huh?
Thank you for having me on, Remington. It's a joy and a pleasure to be here and to share with your audience.
Yeah. So, would we like to just? I guess the interesting thing that I was, like I said before, we were there. There's just a there's a, it all started somewhere, and it's a very personal story. But I thought it was so nice that you share that. And can you share that with our listeners, with our viewers,
Yeah.
how you ended up? I guess I don't want to take it away, but like it's it's tough when you, I guess, when you grow up in situations you don't really see things for what they are as a kid. You're just a kid, right? So.
Hmm. Yeah. So I grew up with my mother and one of my brothers. At the time, when I was really young, everything seemed normal. I was involved in a lot of activities. But then as I started getting into my teen years, I realized that my mother was very controlling and she was mentally ill. I didn't totally understand it at that point, but we became very restricted in what we were able to do. Couldn't spend time with friends when we got into our teen years, couldn't do a lot of the normal activities that kids would do. And that got worse, got into high school, different secondary schools and stuff. And she just became very controlling. Had to come home after school. We were allowed to do a sport, but no hanging out with our friends. At the same time, also, I was kind of planning my escape to get away from her. And I thought, okay, if I could help her get a college degree and a career, then I could get away and I wouldn't be so controlled. So I encouraged her to go to college and I
Oh.
started tutoring her between 4 to 6 to 8 hours a night because she had a high school education, but she didn't even know how to form a sentence with a subject, verb, and noun. She didn't really understand a lot of things that are needed to advance to the next level. Her math was very basic, all those types of things. And so when she took college courses, the pace was too fast for her. So I encouraged her to take notes. And then when I got home from school and she got home, I'd read through her textbook, read through her chapters, and then go through it and teach her material. So often that took me into, 2 in the morning or even later. And then I would work on my own schoolwork and then sometimes not even sleep, sometimes get 1 or 2 hours of sleep and then go to school. So I did that with her for about 6 years. The first 4 years were
Jesus.
pretty intense to help her get a bachelor's degree.
How old
And
were you when it get started? Sorry to
I was
interrupt
in
you.
ninth grade, so I don't even know what was that, 14 years old, somewhere in there.
Jesus, yeah. That's no joke.
And so, yeah, and then when I finished high school, she graduated with a college degree, a bachelor's in education, and then so she could teach, ironically enough. And then she decided she wanted to get a master's. So I was in college and I decided to stay at home, live at home, and go to the local university, Arizona State University, because I got scholarships and got paid to go to college there. And so then for the next 2 years, I again worked with her at night and I also had a job. So I was very sleep deprived for many years, but helped her get 2 masters. And at that point, my breakaway point was I signed up and I got a scholarship to go study abroad in France. And that was my escape. I'd planned it for years and I knew once I went away and lived in another country, I could come back and say I was different and I was grown up. And I knew that she wouldn't like me. And sure enough, it's when I left, within a day, she had called me and threatened suicide if I didn't come home, that she couldn't live without me, all these different things that I figured would happen. And so I had a friend check on her.
Yeah.
And she didn't do anything like that, but it was an attempt to control me. She didn't like that I got away. And when I came back, she didn't like how I acted because I was more independent and I had gone against her. And so she kicked me out within a couple days. And, I went and moved in with a friend. And a week later, she begged me to come back. And I said, no, I'm done. Done.
What kind of mental illness did she have? I mean, I guess
yeah. At the time, I didn't really understand it, but I since found out when she was passing away, hospice said that she for sure had bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
But, talking to different psychologists since then, and even when she was still alive, we're pretty sure she also had something called borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
And they switch between one day to the next. You don't know if they like you or they hate you. And that's truly how it was. When I woke up every morning, it's like, okay, what personality are you going to be today? Are you going to be nice and kind, or are you going to hate me, hate everything I do? And it was that if the switch flipped every day, or sometimes in the middle of the day.
Wow.
And I just never knew what personality was going to show up.
It's insane that I mean, just not insane, but just growing up like that. I have it a little bit in my family too. Like I know that it's around there, and I've dealt with like a lighter version of that just with myself, even, having it coming, like kind of being raised or knowing that your dad or someone else deals with these types of issues, but it obviously wasn't so extreme. It's just growing up and coming out of it, like knowing your mother almost better than she knows herself in some sense, because you can see it as an outsider and not being affected by it. And there's like a certain age that where you started to kind of been able to like kind of know how to treat her so that your personality is being shaped by this, because you can't break out of that, right? You have to fit in her mold. Otherwise she freaks out. Yeah.
Absolutely. And growing up, I had no idea how to handle it, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, how could you, right? I mean, like,
I had no clue. And, I knew there was something wrong because when I went to go live in France, I lived with a French family and there was consistency in that woman's behavior. And that was also part of the reason why I wanted to go see the world. Because if I stayed at home, I was so controlled. And anytime I went and visited friends or stayed with friends or stayed overnight with a friend, there was such anger in her the next day that at a certain point it became, not worth the wrath I would face from her the next day.
Yeah.
So getting away and getting to see what, a normal, I mean, what is normal, but another type of
Well,
situation,
yeah.
and how that woman treated me, kind of in a French mother, American daughter type of way,
Yeah.
I could see some consistency. And so I knew there was something wrong with her, but, I wasn't skilled in psychology and how to handle someone that way. So it's something that just I had to learn over time.
And so you planned this escape. You got out of the grips of your mom, and by you know by education through education, which is just awesome. Just to hear that you actually trained your mom, got your mom master's degree, so that she could have enough independence to not be dependent on you, right? Like
Yes.
that's
Yes.
it's amazing, right? And then in this other interview, I heard that you're just an valedictorian, straight A's, just this yeah, it definitely, it seems like at the beginning it's really tricky, but in hindsight it's like, look how much you've been able to achieve by coming out of this type of situation, right? I mean, you went over to France, and you learned what happened in France. Like, your education in France was totally interesting to me.
Yeah, so I went to, it's called the Université Catholique de Lille. So it's like a Catholic university in a little town called Lille in northern France near Belgium.
Okay.
And I finished up a French major over there. So I took classes, culture, economics, and just it was a targeted program for foreigners
Uh-huh.
who wanted to come learn the language, the culture. And so I was kind of almost in a self-study portion of that. So there's a whole group of us, but I was, anyone from different levels of their learning were part of that program. So they just gave me stuff to progress on my own, a little bit separately from the rest of my classmates, because I had taken extra classes and stuff prior to arriving. So I just kind of did my own thing within the group, and then lived in French society and traveled around Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice. You did the classic, like with the trains, with the public transportation in Europe is just, it's awesome for that, right?
Yeah.
Were you able to travel around Europe too, or did you stay mainly in the France area?
During our courses, we got 1 week where I traveled away and went to Prague and
Yeah.
Germany, went to a couple places. And then after the semester was over, I did backpack Europe for 2 months.
You backpacked, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, were you in the Alps and stuff, or where were you? Where were you at?
I did. I went to Mont Blanc. I went to 12 different countries. So all over Western Europe I went.
Yeah, that's cool. We had a guy on the show last week. He did this trail in Israel, the Israel Trail. I think it's
Oh, neat.
yeah. He did. It took him 8 weeks, and I was thinking to myself, like, just 8 weeks being out by myself with a backpack these days with 3 kids and sitting at home. You just think to yourself, like, wow, what would I do with myself?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
you made your way back
Mm-hmm.
after that was finished. What happened then when you got back to the stateside? Then you said, okay, your mom, you knew it was coming, so you were not under the wing of your mother anymore, or whatever you want to call it. I guess you were never really under her wing, but what did you do next when you got back home and you got out of that situation?
I moved in with a friend and I finished up my college degree and I graduated and I worked for a year and then headed off to graduate school and got my doctorate in physical therapy.
And physical therapy. So what about physical therapy was interesting to you back then? Yeah.
So I've always been interested in physics, in biology, in humans. And so during that year break, I decided to work for a company where I was a Spanish interpreter and I worked as an assistant to a physical therapist and I learned the ropes. And so I did that for a year and finished up a couple courses in order to be able to go to graduate school that I hadn't taken while I was in college for undergraduate. I had a couple of things to make up and then I did that and went off to graduate school in another part of the country to check out the East Coast of the United States.
Yeah. Okay. And so then came physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And we make the transition somewhere into now, like this fill me in this gap. You came across I think somehow you must have reached the limits of modern or I guess you say Western medicine, even in physical therapy. And how did you come about this breathing technique that you developed, and what
Yeah.
part of that in your career did you kind of see that maybe we can do something different and see the ramifications of that?
Yeah, so I did traditional physical therapy for about 5 years, and at the time, I was considered a very good therapist in the area where I worked. A lot of doctors sent people to me exclusively, especially people who had chronic pain, kind of a more complex case. And then at the time, I was recruited to work for another company, and they said the caveat is I had to take some courses through the Postural Restoration Institute and start learning about asymmetries in the body related to the diaphragm. So I did that, jumped ship, went and directed a clinic and grew that clinic. And then from there, I started playing with the teachings about the asymmetries in the body and how that affects movement. And I realized, okay, they focus on the asymmetries, but I wanted to focus on breathing. And I started studying more about breathing. I started experimenting on myself. I was training for marathons at the time. I'd already run, I think, 5 or 6 marathons, and I decided that I wanted to qualify for Boston. And so I needed to drop another 5, 6 minutes off my time in order to do that. And as I was playing with it, I realized, okay, I'm on a treadmill, and if I change the way I breathe, but more change the way I position my rib cage,
Uh-huh.
which influences the way I breathe, all of a sudden my body went out of pain. I didn't have the aches, the pain, the tightness, the just the different things that can happen when you're doing endurance running.
Yeah.
It just all went away. And I started studying it more, and I realized that if I could calm down my nervous system, that fight or flight nervous system that ramps me up, when I calm it down, my body goes into neutral, my muscles, the aches, pains, the tightness, all of that goes away. And so at first, I didn't realize, okay, I was stumbling onto something that most people had no idea what I was talking about. And I thought, okay, does everyone know this? And I'm just late to the game. But then I soon realized most people had no idea what I was talking about. And when I talked to them about it, they thought I had 3 heads.
It does. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so it's almost sounds too simple, right? It's like, wait a minute. So
It really was.
you just change
Yeah.
your posture, and now yeah.
Yeah. And so I started working, I started talking to my clients about it, who I was seeing at this clinic. And I just said, hey, can I just experiment on you and try this breathing on you? And I want to see what you feel. And so it became this process of I would experiment on myself first, kind of work on the process. What do I feel? Then teach other people.
Mm-hmm.
And people started getting better faster than they ever did before. And some people didn't want to try it. And then some doctors who found out about me teaching their patients breathing said, don't do that. And so I had to stop doing that. But then there were some who I knew who said, if the patient is okay with it, go, by all means, go for it. And so then eventually enough people got better faster than traditional methods. And I started developing a process to it. I started realizing, okay, if I teach this, that doesn't get them better. If I teach them this way of breathing, they get worse. If I teach them this way of breathing, they get better. And so I just started figuring out when I break down all the parts of breathing, I could put it in a step-by-step sequence, and it could help people get better. And if I went out of order, or if I taught them a different way, then they wouldn't get better. So you can use breathing as a tool to get you better or to make yourself worse.
That's interesting.
And of course, I'm going to teach people the way to get them better.
Unless we're on your bad side, then we're never. You'd be like, here,
there
teach
you
me.
go. Yeah, exactly. So don't get on my bad side now. So I started going through this, and I coupled it with changing the body position.
Yeah.
And people just started getting better. People who are scheduled for major surgeries, low back surgeries, neck surgeries, rotator cuff surgeries, knee replacement surgeries, I could get them out of the surgery. And it really wasn't I was getting them out of surgery. I was teaching them the skills that they could get themselves out of surgery. Because what I teach is them learning how to control their nervous system so muscles in their body release to free up the joints. And then they learn how to activate other muscles to hold them in that neutral good position so their body works the way it was designed typically is similar to when they were as a kid,
Yeah.
when they could move freely, roly poly, that they didn't have this guarded nature about them that was a result of all the stresses that have added up over life.
It's it's something that's exactly that. That's the problem, right? It takes, so it's like these little small steps that go in the wrong direction, and then after like 20 years, you have a chronic illness, but you never saw it really coming because it was. And I wonder, for me, like, if I just think, well, what's the first step? You know, I'm sitting here with you and I'm thinking, well, I hear my neck's hurting, and you have like there's a breathing technique that I can do to relax my nervous system, right?
Right.
Is that the heart of it? Is it just one technique,
It's,
or are there multiple techniques?
well, the technique is a whole process.
Yeah.
It's not just boom, you do this and your pain's going to go away,
Okay.
because there are layers upon layers of compensations in your body, and you would need to learn the skills of using this specific way of breathing and repositioning your body to change the way your body is held by your nervous system and calm down your nervous system. So it's a whole process. It's not just 5 minutes and boom, you're fixed, because your nervous system has set habits.
Yeah.
They are ingrained in you, and those habits will stay that way. Just like, let's say you're used to eating a bowl of nuts every single day at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
When 8 o'clock comes, you're going to crave those bowl of nuts. If you don't, and it's going to take some time to change the way your nervous system craves that because of the habit you've set up. Now, the same thing, the way that you actually hold your neck is determined by your rib cage position and how you breathe. I can teach you in 5 minutes how to breathe differently,
Mm-hmm.
but as soon as you get distracted, your nervous system's going to go back to your rib cage being elevated, your chest out, and your neck being tight. So it takes a practice of working on changing your nervous system. And initially, it might be okay, we start with getting your rib cage down. Then we have to get your low back to relax. We have to get your pec muscles to let go. And all of that might free up your neck. And then you don't have neck pain again. But there is a process to it.
There's a total I injured my rib last year in jiu-jitsu. I got pulled with my jacket got pulled underneath there and it popped it out.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Yes.
I've never had that kind of pain in my life. Like 6 months, and there was probably like a good 6 week period where I couldn't sleep. Like I've never been able to not sleep because of the pain.
Yeah.
And
Ouch.
yeah, I wish I would have known you back then.
Yes.
But then you start getting creative. Like I then really started figuring out, like, okay, no one's helping me. Like everyone, like the doctor looked at my back, stuck a shot in my back, in my spine.
Mm-hmm.
I had a rib injury. There were so many. I'm sure you hear this every day. I don't. But then it's like, okay, no one's helping me. I got to help myself. So I got this teeter chair. You know those from something. Teeter is the name of the guy that designed it. It's like a hanging chair that hangs you and decompresses your spine.
Got it. Okay.
And once I got into that, it was like that was a huge level. It probably got me like 50% back to just.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but I think that in that chair, it's a similar thing. Like when you're there and you're holding it all in, you have to kind of let it out and like relax yourself so that the muscles aren't holding against you being decompressed.
Yes, absolutely.
And when you have injuries, I feel like injuries do that same. Like your muscles, like, okay, I can't trust you anymore with your own body, so I'm gonna just block this whole area and make sure this is really tight because last time I let you do your own thing, you broke your rib. So now I'm gonna tighten up everything around that. And and when you say nervous system, I feel like it's interesting. I think a lot of people don't understand how layered that is and how that's on top of me injuring my knee at 15 years old and having the left side of my that whole thing happened at 15, and now my hips have a different shift to them, and that creates like the whole body just creates this. It's like a map of injuries and trying to protect itself, and then it's mental too, right? I mean it's all mental, and you don't want to hurt yourself. You have that injury. I mean, I can see it's like just layers and layers of taking that away. It's interesting.
Absolutely. So what you're describing, that neuroprotective response, it's something that happens when we have an injury, we get into that fight or flight mode, muscles tighten up. In an injury, sometimes you can feel it, but a lot of times we're unaware to the extent of that happening. And then our body habituates to keep us that mode. And so we don't realize how detrimental that is to our healing, to our movement, to our ability to return back to neutral and normalize. So it is a response that we can learn to control and decrease that response in a safe way that allows us to return back to the way we were pre-injury or pre-trauma.
Yeah, and it has to be kind of like a goal that you. I mean, it's something that you have to want to do, right? You have to even think like
Yeah.
it's possible to return to normal. I think even mentally, if you're not open to it or you're not ready for, you habituate and that's it. That's my new life now. I've got 20% functionality in my knee now. That's
Yeah.
just how it is, and you just keep going.
Yep, absolutely. We think we don't have control because we don't know how to control it. And that's where the real problem is. And that's where someone like me comes in and says, okay, let's get on a Zoom. I do this with people internationally all over the world and
Okay.
say, let's look at you. Let's see how you move. Let's look at where you're holding stored emotions. And we're going to work on transforming your body, transform your nervous system and the way you sense and feel things. And people then learn the skill and they can get themselves out of these issues that have been long standing for years, decades, even longer.
Stored emotions. So it's
Mm-hmm.
also on an emotional level that you analyze them. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I do work with people who have stress and anxiety,
Yeah.
and those are their only problems. They don't have physical pain. And so I work with them as well to help them decrease stress, anxiety, to improve their focus, attention, performance, energy levels, things related to their business as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess going from there, can you talk about how you ended up in Antarctica? I mean, that was something
Sure.
that when you said that, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
Antarctica. That's not just
Yes.
like an everyday trip, right?
No, it's not. So when I was working for a clinic for someone else, I became known for helping people avoid joint replacement surgery. So
Yeah.
I'd help one person, a well known psychologist in the Phoenix area, and then she referred another world famous photographer to me who was interested in having me help him out of a joint replacement, knee replacement surgery. So he came to visit me, flew across the country to come visit me for several days to work with me, got him out of pain. He went traveling around the world, came back a few months later, wanted to work on the rest of his body pain. So we did that, and he flew home pain free for the first time in 40 years. And then when he got home, he decided to go swimming. He put his wet, towels and stuff on the floor, walked away, then came back around the corner, forgot all about that, and the pool of water that was on the floor slipped and fell, busted up his shoulder. And he had an MRI that showed rotator cuff tear, bicep involvement, all these different things. Couldn't lift his arm past his waist. And then he flew back to Arizona a couple weeks later and said, what can you do? And I said, well, you could go without surgery, because he had all these trips planned for the year all over the world. And he didn't want to do surgery because then he might not be able to do these trips. And I said, we can work on it and, get rid of that neuroprotective response that you and I just talked about. And so we did that for a couple days. And by the time he left, he could lift his arm up overhead. And he wasn't pain free. He had a little pain when he reached to the very top because he did tear some tissues.
That's gonna say like
But
it's a physical tear. Like you can't think that away, right? Like,
no, he did have a physical tear. But the reason he couldn't lift his arm wasn't because of the physical tear, it was
yeah.
because of the neuroprotective response. And this happens with quite a few people. He had a complete tear of one of his rotator cuff tendons, which most people think you have to have surgery for, but you don't necessarily. Not everyone is in that case. And it depends on what you want to do with the rest of your life. If you're a high level athlete, then maybe you want to get it repaired. He is, an elderly man, and all he wanted to do is be able to lift his arm overhead pain free and to be able to hold a big camera, which I said, we'll try it for a couple days. And if in a couple days we can get your arm overhead with minimal pain and you can hold a camera, then I think you're okay for no surgery. So he went with that. And by the end of that, he said, I'd like to hire you to travel around the world, coach me on this process, and basically give up your life. So I did.
Basically give up your life, and so I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's a cool opportunity. How old were you at the time? I mean, obviously, it's like if you had kids and all that kind of stuff going on, it's like, yeah, I'm sorry,
yeah.
but
Well, it's 2018, so it was just
yeah,
a few years ago.
right on.
Um, and I rented out my house. I
Yeah,
put everything in storage, and I quit my job, and I went off. And first I moved to Florida. So I'm in Arizona. I moved to Florida first, so across the country.
yeah.
A week there, then we headed off to Arctic Norway, Arctic Finland, Scotland, and England. Traveled around for 7 weeks, and then went back to Florida. And then I also had a previous trip to Iceland and Greenland planned, so I went off and did that. Ran a marathon in Greenland. Went to then traveled to different places around the country with him,
Mm.
and eventually ended up in Argentina and took a Russian icebreaker ship across the Drake Passage, across the Southern Ocean, to a really remote place in Antarctica called Snow Hill Island. And you have to go through the Weddell Sea to get there. And for those who know about Shackleton's adventure and shipwreck, it's the same area where he got shipwrecked. So we went through there and eventually got to as close as we could. The ice eventually got too thick for the ship to break through. So we anchored about 6 miles away from Snow Hill Island, and then had to take a helicopter over those 6 miles, dropped us on sea ice. And then we had to trek another mile and a half to the emperor penguin colony, where we got to photograph them.
I was gonna say,
And
like, what's the
then
goal here? Yeah, okay, gotcha. Yeah,
photographed the emperor penguin colony, spent 3 days there, photographing them. Didn't have any food or drink or anything there. Very protective, making sure we stayed away from the penguins. If we sat down, they came up to us. That was okay, but never approach them. Don't scare them or anything like that.
yeah.
And we're there, each day we had to get helicoptered in. Some people spent just a couple hours on the colony with them.
Mm.
I spent 10 hours. I stayed as long as they would allow each day, and then went back to the ship at night. And then after 3 days there, they realized the weather conditions had turned unfavorably. So we had to leave earlier than expected. And we had hit a storm on the way there, and some people had some broken bones from that. So they're very cautious of the weather because it can flip very quickly. And the conditions are very bad when the weather turns south in Antarctica.
So some people on the ship on the travel there had suffered injuries just for the travel to get okay, because the ship's just racking around so much that people are going to fall down and hurt themselves, or how did that
Yeah, so we got caught in a storm. So for 25 hours we were in the middle of the Drake Passage, just spinning in circles in a storm. And with a icebreaker ship, it doesn't have a keel, so there's no stabilizing force.
Yeah.
And it's because you have to ram the ice or go on top of the ice and break it, so you can't have a keel under it.
Okay.
So basically the ship just goes, it's tossed like a rag doll in the wind. It's just back and forth, and there's nothing that you can do about it. So you just kind of hold on. And I mean, I fell out of my bunk bed several times trying to get down. And one of my roommates, she's a good friend of mine now, we had gone to get water, and the ship lurched in the middle of the storm, and it picked up her and the chair she was sitting in and threw her 12 feet across. She slammed into a table, the ground, broke her elbow. And so the technique that I do with people, the breathing, I used it with her to help her, with her swelling, regain her motion. Because if you've ever had an elbow fracture, a lot of times those get frozen and you don't get your full motion back. But because we're able to calm down your nervous system and not have that neuroprotective response kick in so much, I was able to get her arm straight and bent completely, even though it was fractured. And she healed, and she was able to get full motion back with her arm.
You're the person to have around for a situation like that. That sounds like a
Yeah.
superpower, really.
I was lucky that I had the right experiences in my life to help be aware of this happening and to help people. So I'm lucky about that.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. That the things that you had to go through to get to this point, and then still to be able to say I'm lucky for that I can help people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just still picturing you in this boat. So I got to go back to the boat real quick. So that when you have bad waves and stuff, is that an advantage to have a boat like that in these stormy situations? Not for the throwing itself around, but does it it won't then it won't capsize, or is it harder to capsize a boat like that? Or is that I don't know.
We went side to side. It wasn't just up and down. We went side to side too.
Yeah.
I think, the boats are built so much differently nowadays versus back in the early 1900s when Shackleton had a shipwreck.
Yeah.
I mean, boat engineers are fascinating and amazing. And, obviously the captains of these boats wouldn't take us in a place where they knew it wouldn't be handled. But obviously there are times where people get shipwrecked. So it still happens.
Yeah.
We're lucky that it didn't happen to us. And I'm grateful for the crew, this amazing Russian crew who got us through it.
Yeah, right on. So you got there, you went out there. That's pretty cool to be out there with the penguins. And you also just said, okay, I'm here, so I'm going to take as much time as I can take until they say we have to go home. So you're there for 10 hours a day just watching these penguins. I've seen it obviously I've seen it, but how is it live? It can't compare, right?
It's amazing. So I was there to photograph them. I have had an art gallery showing. I have a website for that. I have tons of photos. I sell them, all that. So I was there it's another side business that I have, because it was all about photographing them, the beauty of them. And they're animals who have no idea what humans are. It was the first time in 8 years the ship had gone down there.
Mm-hmm.
So they had no idea what humans were. They were curious. They moved their head around like, what is this human being that's taller than me? But they're 4 feet tall, so they're pretty tall themselves. But they didn't have the typical fear that animals are used to with humans. We're really lucky that we got to be around that. And they're absolutely stunningly beautiful. I mean, the colors in them, when they're clean and the bright snow ice, you can see, like, it's just stunning. The crispness of all their colors is just, it'll blow your mind away. And there were times where we saw evidence of global warming. There were days one of the days it was in the 50s there. And the ice was melting. It was kind of mucky, so they're all dirty. We saw basically everything. It was really, stunningly beautiful, but also sad at the same time to see what the changes in the climate are doing to this area, and how it's hurting these animals.
Yeah, you think that even Antarctica is being affected? Obviously, it makes sense. But you think when you get down there, you would think that this place is so untouched from humans, but even that is not untouched, because
it's almost hurt worse because of the way, when you have global warming, there's going to be less snow and less ice that builds up, and that's what actually moderates temperature, because it reflects the sun rays back. And instead of having less ice, you have more deep blue waters, which then absorb the heat, which actually changes all the ocean dynamics, and how the hot water, goes into the heat goes into the ocean. It changes the ocean currents and affects the equator. So now the warm water that typically comes from the equator and goes down underneath the ocean, or goes into the ocean, and the water moves down to the poles, now it's not being moderated. So that's why we have these now more fluctuations in weather and storms and stuff. It's going to just get worse. It's all related. I mean, it also impacts the krill. Our fishing of krill impacts there's less krill available for the penguins, and it affects their food supply. So there's so many things that are affected down there because of our actions.
Yeah, when you actually go down there and see it, then you realize, like, the how much I think a normal person doing their normal day work, driving in the car that they go, and they don't think about the CO2 or any of this stuff that's happening. And but when you actually go down there and see that the fingers of humanity have reached all the way out to a majestic place like this, is affecting these animals that don't even know what humans are.
Yep.
I think it's also so interesting that I kind of forgot about that animals can be like that. Like, they don't even have fear for humans because they don't know what a human is.
Right. Absolutely. It's a rare thing to meet an animal that has no idea what a human being is.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of makes you think, okay, I guess I'm not the only, because humans have this tendency to be just so egocentric, right? And then everything revolves around this. And you go down there and I don't know who you are. I don't know what humans are. I don't know what the big deal is,
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. Where do we go from there, Amy?
Well, I came back and I decided to start my own business, my own practice. And from there, I started you know, deciding to, okay, how do I build a business? And I started going to different events where I'd meet people who would possibly be in pain or need my services, but I didn't advertise that. I just went and I was learning, and I learned about investing. I started learning, just about business and growing a business, and started meeting people and started helping people who asked for help. And that helped me grow. Then I started speaking to masterminds and traveling around the country, started speaking at conferences, local things, started growing my business. Then I, became very busy and worked with people in person, worked with people virtually. And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And once COVID hit, I switched to all virtual and started presenting again on a virtual world and grew my client list. Now I work with people from all over the world, and I spend my days mostly on Zoom, but I space things out and I work with people in that manner.
Uh, that's I was gonna ask you about that. I mean, but you were doing virtual things before COVID hit, so it was like it just kind of ramped that up then instead of.
Absolutely, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, I guess I can't get like a free consultation because that's not what the idea of the show is. But like you could do that. We could sit here and you can kind of you could fix my posture, and then would you meditate with me, or is there like a style of communication that we find, because the emotional things are that's very interesting to me. I mean, just having these conversations, I feel like if you were here in the office, um, you have different blocks there, or in the studio. You have like a different block, but you also have different. We can look at each other straight in the eyes. I'm looking at the TV right now, and I have like the camera over there, and we have a connection that's enough, and it's kind of an interesting way to meet people too. I think like we do this conversation like that, we don't know each other at all, and but yeah, what is the differences for you when you're doing something live as opposed to doing something over Zoom? I guess is what I'm trying to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, so it starts off the same, no matter if they're live or on Zoom.
Yeah.
Give them paperwork. We go through your medical history. I like to know everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And then I start to have you do movements. So whether you're on Zoom or in person, you're going to move and do certain daily movements like squatting, reaching, lifting your arms overhead. There's different things that I go through to look at how your nervous system is guarding and impacting the way you move.
Yeah.
And then from there, I explain the process and what I see, the science of what I see in your body and how we're going to work with that. And then if you're on Zoom or in person, we start teaching you how to breathe differently and how to position yourself in different ways and how to change your rib cage position. And so if you're in person, I'm going to use my hands to help guide your ribs to in a neutral way. If you're not, I'm going to use my words to help you sense and move your ribs in that way. And in person, I may not have you move in as many positions as I have you do in Zoom.
Yeah.
So I achieve it either way.
Yeah.
I think Zoom is actually better for most people because it forces you to learn it on your own. And I give you so many things and I record the session so that you have that resource. You can play back everything we do.
That's cool.
And so as we're going through a position and breathing, and I'm coaching you constantly talking and saying, do this with your collarbone, this with your belly button, do all these things. You can record it. Well, you have the recording and then you can play it back. It allows you to keep working on that technique before we progress you to the next thing on your next visit.
Yeah, that's interesting. The recording function. It's true. You can. So it's like almost like and being able to see yourself makes a big difference. I think just even to see how because you don't really have that same from a different angle. You can't. It's not just looking in the mirror, right? You can see it from the side or from the back how you're moving, and then you realize, wow, I really can't even get my hand above my head. I always like in your mind maybe it's here, but it's really just there or something.
Yep. Absolutely. So yes, it's an amazing experience for those who do it through Zoom as well as in person. But Zoom is nice because you can see your body transform over the weeks. So if we start you, and I typically say one time a week, depending on the situation. Occasionally I'll have people do it twice a week, depending on their circumstance. But you can do once a week and it gives you time to practice what we did. And then we move on to the next skill. And so as we do that, you can look back at your original video and say, wow, my whole body transformed.
Just step by
and
step.
You'll see the difference. And it corresponds with how you feel too.
Yeah. What do you think about traditional physical I go still ever since my injury. I go once a week, and my guy he gets me lubed up, and then he gives me one good on the back, just the typical that one good crack. Like
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about that? Is it still something that's useful to do?
Well, absolutely. I don't take away any type of modality. If someone's getting a benefit from something, by all means,
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you not to go somewhere. I never tell people not to go to someone. It's always your choice. If you like what someone's doing to you, by all means, go do it. Now, am I going to do that to someone? No, because that's not kind of my philosophy. I want to teach someone how to relax and let go of those muscles so they don't need to crack their back.
Yeah, because the cracking always seems like how can that be healthy? I mean, it's nice. It feels good for a moment, but I wonder how much of that is really necessary. You can't, but it's also like I can't imagine it feeling better without that. Honestly, I have to. It's just hard to imagine. You know.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it, the reason it feels good is because they're cracking your back to try to get you movement because your muscles are holding you in a position that limits your movement.
Yeah.
So if you change your nervous system, it's going to change the signals that are given to your muscles. Your muscles are going to behave differently. You're not going to need to crack your back.
Yeah, just kind of doing it from the bottom up instead of from top down, kind of thing.
Right. So basically, it's my approach is an internal approach. Let's change your internal wiring so that you don't need an external approach to fix you or to make you feel better. Why not change it from the inside out so you never have to do that again so that you fully control your body instead of your body happening to you and you having to find a resource to help try to get you temporary relief.
And so, like, now you've got me super intrigued, right? So I'm thinking, like,
Mm-hmm.
what are we in for here? Are we in for like six weeks, or what's your normal? It's hard to without the maybe the
Yeah,
it's
I can't tell you how long it's going to be. I mean,
it
that would
depends.
be
Yeah.
gross negligence on my part,
Yeah.
and I would be lying,
Yeah. Okay.
to be honest.
Fair
I
enough. Yeah.
mean, I literally the reason my first sessions with people are 90 minutes long is because we go through your medical history, your physical, mental, emotional. We go through all that because all of that plays a factor.
Yeah.
How much time do you have? Do you follow through with instructions? How much do you sense in your body? It all plays a role. So I
Yeah.
can't accurately give you an answer. And I know people hate that, but I have to be honest.
No, I guess it's the first silly question that everyone asks, but it makes sense
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't just
Yeah.
that you can't just be like, oh yeah, 5 weeks and you're good to go. That would definitely
Right.
be like selling snake oil. Like
We're humans.
yeah,
Or we change all the time. Our circumstances change. Our stress levels change. It's going to influence all of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And stress too, like this whole meditation or just figuring out like what these effects of have on us. It's
Mm-hmm.
even just being aware of it is hard sometimes. You're so caught up in it, and then asking for help is a huge thing too, right? Like most people don't even want to admit that there's anything going on. So how are you gonna,
Yeah, I think most of my clients are at the point where nothing else works and they're
Yeah.
okay with asking for help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that part I don't usually face. I usually get people that really are asking for help and I'm grateful that they're giving me a chance.
Yeah. That's a good place to start, at least, so they're open to something that, like I said, it's you kind of intrigued me there. I feel like after we get offline here, I have to get some contact information because I wonder, I go there once a week and it's always the same crack. And sometimes, like when I do yoga and stuff like that, it feels like it's better. It feels like I don't have as much. There's not really a crack there anymore. So it's like
Good.
if there's not a crack there anymore, then maybe, like you said, there's through the yoga or through me relaxing and not being stressed or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to everything's kind of just staying in that balance, right?
Right. And that's possible. And obviously I can't diagnose you here and I
I'll
wouldn't
do
want
it.
to do that.
What do you want me to do? I can
It's not the right platform for it, but
live.
you know, it's really, we all find our path and we meet the right people at the right time to help us. And it depends on what your goals are. If you want to get rid of the pain or cracking, the necessary cracking, then, we can work together. and we can work on that. I might be the right person for you. Your person that you're currently working with might be the right person for you if you want to continue to get cracked every week. It really, everyone's goals are different and what they resonate is different. Some people want to get cracked every week, and I say by all means. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It is. I'm not, placing a negative or a positive on it. It's what do you like to do? Some people really like that. I wouldn't want to take that away from them if they really like that.
Yeah, you take the time to understand the person and their situation, which I think is something that is in Western medicine. It's in Germany. It's the same. Like we see it all the time. The doctors say they don't have the time. They don't have the time for that. I can't sit here and ask these questions or get to know this person across from me. I just have to diagnose them, and they need to go to the next step. And with you, it's like I can sit there. I can have a conversation. You're how do you say it? Empathic. Yeah, you have empathic personality. You're listening. You're ready. You're picking up on things that maybe someone else isn't even picking up on themselves. Yeah. So I think we ran out of time for today. Amy, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us, your story. And this is a really interesting. One last thing: are you using straws and balloons? I kind of heard that. Is there a straw?
I do. I use those to help people change the way they breathe.
Yeah.
And it really makes a difference. Yeah. So, if people want to reach out to me, they can reach me, Amy, AMY, at pabertinstitute.com.
Okay.
And they can tell me they heard about me on your podcast. I do free 15-minute calls just to kind of guide people if they need free resources or if they want to work one-on-one. We can always set that up, and just send me an email and be happy to connect with your listeners.
Very cool. I'll put that all in the show notes, and thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you